Welcome to the Sirius report. This is Paul, and once again, we're going to return to the subject of China, Chinese technologies, how this relates to AI and chip manufacturing, and why China never rests on its laurels. It is always seeking to develop new technologies, and how US attempts to basically try and destroy Huawei failed, how they're trying to restrict them access to chip technologies failing, and how the old adage, necessity is the mother of invention, never applied more than it does to China itself. Now, we talked previously about DeepSeek itself. I don't want to go into that specifically again, but what we can say is Huawei and DeepSeek are working together to certainly reshape global perspective on AI technology, AI industry. I mean, the former is developing improved AI chips that can counter as an alternative to foreign chips. And the latter is aiming to provide, effective, very cheap services through open source technology. Now, in recent weeks, there's been a lot of discussion about this with respect to the United States and China. But what's very telling is new DeepSeek AI models are actually powered by Huawei Ascend 910C processors. Now, DeepSeek R1 and V3 are two AI models. R1 is a reasoning model, whilst V3 is a typical LLM, which is a large language model. They both offer the best artificial intelligence services, like answering real life-based questions, dealing with theories, solving mathematical problems, or logical reasoning. Now, both models have become immensely popular, as I said, because they're open source, they're efficient, and cost effective. Now, of course, they can perform excellently in complex planning for logistics or supply chain management, complex coding problems, assist researchers with new ideas. Now, unlike most AI applications, we know DeepSeek is both free and unlimited, but it's worth noting that DeepSeek's R1 has been trained obviously by nvidia H100 chips, but it runs on the Huawei Ascend 910C for inference, which of course reduces China's AI reliance on US products. The Ascend 910C has been built with several improved components, and Huawei has said that testing has proved the 910C efficient in various aspects over, note, nvidia's chipsets. And the DeepSeek team did report that the Huawei Ascend 910C had achieved 60% of nvidia's H100 performance in terms of inference operations. This kind of hints that China is taking huge measures to withstand restrictions of access to US technology. And despite the lack of certain technologies and certain facilities, China is introducing rapidly innovative products that are going to cause problems for foreign alternatives. And this merger between Huawei and DeepSeek proves that China is increasingly becoming self-sufficient in terms of, and isn't depending on others for technology. And really this is just the beginning, because Huawei is constantly seeking to improve its AI chipsets and make them better in terms of NVIDIA itself. Of course, the US had the attitude of, trying to ban or thinking of banning DeepSeek, then perhaps not, and trying to put forward strict penalties on those who break the laws and use China's AI models. Now, that subsequently appears to have not happened, but this is another example where China quietly goes about developing technologies. Yes, it's not going to happen overnight. Of course, that would be ridiculous to suggest that, but it's happening far quicker than conventional wisdom would suggest. And also, more importantly, how the United States thinks it's going to progress, because the US think it's going to take China 10 years or 20 years. And in some cases, it's taking China 10 months or 20 months or somewhere in between to develop such technologies. And with regards to chips, it's worth noting the following. There's a company called CXMT, which is China's leading producer of memory chip, that is gaining global market share at the expense of South Korean competitors, and that joins DeepSeek in strengthening Beijing's drive to reduce its dependence on foreign technology, in this case with respect to artificial intelligence. Now, CXMT, which is Shangxin Memory Technologies, has increased its share of the 90 billion global DRAM memory market from basically nothing in 2020 to 5% last year. It doesn't sound a lot, but it is to go from nothing. The company is also spearheading China's efforts to break into the high growth market for the high bandwidth memory, the HBM. That's a crucial component in running AI systems, even things like OpenAI's ChatGPT, which obviously is a competitor to DeepSeek. But CXMT's rise is threatening the traditional dominance of the sector by South Korean chip makers like Samsung and SK Hynix, and also the US rival Micron, who have accounted between them for about 96% of DRAM revenues in 2023. So with the rise of CXMT, Korean chip makers are now facing the new reality where the lower end of the market is flooded with Chinese products. And this is a classic trait of the Chinese. They start at the lower end, they take a market dominant position, and then just slowly work through the whole sector into more high-end technology, and they end up achieving the same objectives. And it's not just a matter of technological superiority, but it's also a volume, meaning that, companies like Samsung are being hit by oversupply and lower chip prices. Now, CXMT was established in 2016. At that time, China possessed almost no capability to produce DRAM chips. They're used in servers, computers, mobile devices. But then there was investments from Alibaba and Beijing's state-backed so-called Big Fund. By 2019, the company had started mass production of so-called DDR4 chips. That's the most advanced category of DRAM memory production. So it seems as though CXMT recently began mass production of DDR5 memory that was first commercialized by SK Hynix in 2020 and is currently the most advanced category of DRAM. Now, the Chinese company is also boosting its DDR4 production and increasing capacity by basically threefold in the space of 2 years. Therefore, it would then secure 15% of the global DRAM market. And they've been driving down the price of older DRAM chips. That, of course, causes profit margin issues for companies like Samsung. And therefore, it forces these kind of companies to leave the lower end of the market. And therefore, China can take a more dominant position in doing so. So, telling you, of course, Samsung did say it was reducing its exposure to conventional memory semiconductors because of limited growth for the likes of DRAM products. And, so therefore you can see how this is working out for China. So while CXMT's global market share is still relatively small and heavily concentrated in China, its rapid progress in this DRAM sector kind of generates this snowball effect, because the more market you gain, the larger the share of the volume you gain, the higher your yields go, your costs are reduced, and the more market share you then gain, and you can see this snowballing effect. Basically, that's how the Koreans pushed the Japanese out of the memory sector in the 1980s and 90s, and now it's being done to them in the 2020s. The other thing that's very telling, and this is what Chinese companies also do, CXMT has exploited this loophole in US export controls for the last year and a half. So it allows them to access advanced US chip making equipment to help produce the most cutting edge chips. It was actually interestingly omitted last year from an updated commercial department blacklist that would have prohibited any US companies from doing business with it. Maybe that was an oversight, probably was, might prove to be quite costly. So it's now wanting to build huge fabrication plants, for example, near Shanghai, to introduce different products. Yes, it's still behind certain chipsets like nvidia, but again, it's cornering the lower end of the market. It's moving up through the market. How long before it starts to corner mid-range and then eventually the high end? This, of course, will intensify pressure on like South Korean companies, for example. And they're also, of course, now in competition with each other. And basically, it could end up seeing one or two companies suffering in terms of being squeezed at the low end by the Chinese and the high end by their other competitors. So this is all playing very nicely into the hands of the Chinese, and you can see why. Again, these are huge technological developments, and China's rapid progress means it's something traditional chip makers are going to have to be aware of, because in the end, China might just take a stranglehold across entire sectors. And it's also worth noting the following, that there was a Chinese chip expert called Sun Nan who returned to China. And was largely went unnoticed. And it's interesting, suddenly there was a post put in Chinese social media about how he helped create more than 50 cutting-edge chips in the last 4 years. Now, he came back, this guy's son, after many years in the United States. He wanted to train chip professionals for China and solving the manufacturing problems of high-end chip technology. Now, he's obviously this tenured professor. He returned to China in 2020. He'd spent more than a decade in the US. Now, his homecoming came at the height of this Chinese initiative, which a US policy that basically targeted scientists. If they thought they had any ties to Beijing, they felt obviously targeted, and quite a lot of them went, okay, we're leaving the United States and we're going to go back to China. Now, if you look at high-end semiconductors, that drives innovative sectors from artificial intelligence to quantum computing, is clearly an area of US tech containment that China wants to break ranks with. Now, since he obviously joined Tsinghua University more than 4 years ago, Sun built a team. They've worked on scientific research and industrial applications. This produces more reliable and efficient chips at a far lower cost. And they've also undertaken a number of so-called major national research projects. Now, the high-performance circuit design technologies they've developed have been integrated into more than 50 chips. Now, these chips have been used for the power grid, for high-speed rail, industrial measurement and control, instrumentation, electric vehicles, and multiple other fields. So these chips basically achieve the goal of import substitutions for similar foreign products. They've even surpassed the foreign counterparts in some core technical indices to reach their level of leading technology or leading those chips in those fields for those particular applications, which we've just highlighted. So again, this is another example where China is just taking advantage of the United States' paranoia, amongst other things, to tell scientists, we don't want you working here anymore because we think you're a stooge for Beijing government, you're going to steal our technology. Of course, he can just go back to China, utilize the technology he's developed and advance it, and therefore put China in a strategically better position than if the United States had just left him there. He'd worked there for more than a decade. He was clearly very happy. It was only the threats that made him go, I'm going back to China. And now China benefits from the United States' paranoia in deciding to kick people out for very, very spurious reasons. And finally, I just want to briefly mention a subject about Baidu, because they're going to launch the next iteration of its artificial intelligence model. This will happen in the second half of 2025. This new model is called Ernie 5, and it features multimodal capabilities, enabling it to process and convert between different formats, including text, audio, video, and images. Now, obviously, this planned release comes as part of China's sudden drive in the AI sector, again relates to DeepSeek, because of obviously the capabilities it demonstrated. Now, despite being amongst China's first movers in AI following ChatGPT coming to the market in 2022, Baidu had struggled to gain widespread adoption for its Ernie large language model, the LLM, even though it says Ernie 4. Obviously, the previous model compared to the new one, Ernie 5, coming out later this year, they said matched OpenAI's GPT-4 capabilities. Now, obviously, this tech giant's AI offerings have lagged some of the domestic competitors, including DeepSeek and ByteDance, but obviously investment in data centers and cloud storage is still needed. And despite the likes of DeepSeek challenging the cost efficiency of large AI models, well, we'll see. I mean, DeepSeek may be a big wake-up call even for developers in China, but this shows everybody's working. There's multiple companies working on multiple products to develop AI technology. And the idea the United States is going to control this and control all the technology that needs to be utilized to develop AI is just nonsense. It's not going to happen. And countless other nations are going to work independently and with the likes of China, who've basically said everything's open source, you can have whatever you like and then develop the technology according to your particular needs. But this is, again, more technological developments that is putting China in a very advantageous position. And the US shouldn't rest on its laurels and imagine that its dominant, or what it perceives to be its dominant position, is going to remain the case. And with that, we end this podcast. Thank you very much for listening. For everyone who supports us, much appreciated. Please like, share, subscribe, comment, and get people to listen as well. Help us spread the channel and develop it. And with that, I'll say goodbye.